Good morning. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Tuesday, March 24th, 2026. It's just after, it's about 11:40 a.m. And we have another bill. I'd forgotten we might have this bill. So this is the Pay Act. It's H 950. It was voted out of House Government Operations at the end of last week. And it will likely be incorporated for a budget, assuming we pass it. So we have Bryn from Legislative Council to talk us through it, and then we have Amy from Joint Fiscal Office to tell us about the money, and we have Chair Byron here in case we have any other questions that we need to have answered. So thank you all for coming.
Good morning, committee. Bryn here, Director and Chief Counsel of Legislative Council, here to talk to you about H 950. Thank you for that setting of the table. That was very helpful. So I'm going to jump right in and talk to you about this bill. I will set the stage just a little bit to remind all of you that this is the semi-annual legislative act that sets forth and appropriates funding for the increases for state employees, covering union negotiated collective bargaining agreements. So it authorizes funds for executive, judicial, and legislative branch employees to ensure that their negotiated salary increases are funded for 2 fiscal years. So it's quite typical that this bill covers 2 fiscal years of salary increases.
So it's not semi-annual, it's biannual.
Biannual, sorry. Yes. Yes.
Dude.
And it's that is typically true, not always.
Right.
Yes. Okay. So it's typically distinct. It's its own bill, separate from the state budget bill, but also it's necessary to implement the cost of the labor contract. So there are years that it has been absorbed into the budget bill as well. So I'll jump in with section 1. This is the section that sets out the collective bargaining agreements for fiscal years 27 and 28. So it fully funds FY 27 and 28 of the collective bargaining agreements between the state and the VSEA and the state and the Vermont Troopers Association. So the total numbers for the 2 fiscal years are subsection A sets it out for FY 27. And it sets out a 1.9% average step increase, which is typical. That has been historically the step increase over recent years. And a 2% overall increase that happens in July of this year, plus an additional 2% that happens in January of next year, for a total of a 5.9% increase for fiscal year 27. So it's a 5.9% that is split into 2 parts. So part of it comes in July and the other part of it comes in January. Subsection B sets it out for fiscal year 28. Again, a 1.9% average step increase and a 3% overall increase for a total of 4.9% increase for the fiscal year of 28. So that is sort of your guidepost there is section 1, because the next several sections rely on it. So section 2, I'm on page 2 now. This sets out the exempt employees' permitted salary increases. So this section provides that executive, judicial, and legislative branches may extend the provisions of the FY 28 and 27 and 28 collective bargaining agreements to exempt employees, which are those employees that are not covered by the CBAs. As appropriate and in accordance with their budgets. So it is not a directive, it is a, here's what you may do. And then the branches may move forward as they see fit. I'll move on to section 3 now, on the top of page 3. So this section covers executive branch exempt employees. So it provides that if the governor gives salary adjustments, special salary increases and bonuses to executive branch agency and department heads, deputies and executive assistants, those adjustments shall be in line with those set forth in section 1 in the collective bargaining agreement. So for fiscal year 27, it would be 5.9% increase. Fiscal year 28, 4.9% increase.
Before you get too far, so 5.9%, this is, I'm taking it from the name, it's the Pay Act. So this is about salaries, does it? And then benefits are going to be an annual fluctuation?
That's right. And in case I didn't make it clear, it's just this, it just appropriates funding for the salary increases, not for the base salaries. And typically my understanding is the benefits are accompanied with the base salary.
And the step increases happen
on an annual basis typically.
Right, and that's based on just what position you are, whatever the number,
Exactly.
level you've been assigned, and then that gets.
That's right, in the classified system. Yes, they're called steps in the classified system that sort of provides a roadmap to what your salary will look like over time.
But in the past, I'm just trying to, sometimes the cost of benefits go up more than the cost of the pay. And that just happens, and there's rarely any correction that helps match the increase in what people's,
My understanding is that that is separate and it's within the governor's recommended budget as opposed to the pay act.
okay, so the governor can, if we felt so flush that we could make adjustments to this, if the benefits to the individual employees went up 10%, I know it doesn't match necessarily the 5.9% of their salary, but can the governor adjust the pay act so that it matches the increase in the benefits, or is that just part and parcel of the way that we work? We get 5 points, that they get the 5.9%, and then whatever happens on the benefit side, the increased cost is just what happens.
That is my understanding, that any increase in benefits happens totally separately from the pay act. And it is put forward in the governor's recommended budget that includes salaries and.
I just want to get clear on the different silos here, so, thank you.
So this is saying that this group is getting a almost 6% salary increase?
That is correct for fiscal year 27.
Is this negotiated? And five next year?
It is, yes,
Is it fiscal year 27 and then in 28, they just get the,
4.9.
Over 2 years, they're getting 11% pay increase.
right, but the 5.9 is the first year of the agreement and the lower numbers for the second. Right, okay.
And maybe you're not the one to ask how they decide, and do they look at inflation or any of the market or what other people are getting paid? Because most of us would be really happy to get that kind of an increase, but they aren't in the.
But our salary gets, that's a similar increase.
But then we go from 11 cents to 12 cents, but just, but the point is that I'm just, this is not about you.
No, I know,
But there are people out working in companies and small businesses who would love to get this kind of an increase. It just surprises me how high it is. I guess that's right.
Yeah, so these numbers are in the contracts that are the result of the collective bargaining.
Right.
That's right.
Yes, I understand that. Did you?
Well, I was just gonna clarify, I suspect this is part of the negotiations with the labor contract.
That is where it comes from, yes.
And who does the negotiating? And the labor unions negotiate, and then who negotiates on the other side?
So my understanding is that it's DHR. But we have Amy here who might be able to answer that even better than I can.
So Amy Pope for the Joint Fiscal Office, and there's a labor relations, part of the Department of Human Resources that sort of manage and head up that on behalf of the administration.
Okay. All right, I'm just absorbing that, that's all. All right, continue. Thank you, Brenda.
Yeah, so that may be the sort of most significant part, and then the rest of it is just setting forth all of the other salaries within state government that are impacted by the Pay Act. So section 3, as I mentioned, is the exempt agency and department heads, deputies, executive assistants. So it provides that the governor may adjust those salaries as well in accordance with section 1. So 5.9% in FY27, 4.9% in FY28.
Can you explain, I'm looking at that page 4. Why does the salaries go up? They start in July and then they go up again in January and then again in July.
Yes.
That's the, why is that happening?
Yes, so now we're in section 4. These are the statutory salaries for the executive branch. And so this is the first place where you're going to see all of the struck through salaries that are existing law, and then 3 columns of new salaries. So the first column on your left is the 3.9% increase, which is the result of the 1.9% step increase plus 2% on top of that. So employees will get that increase on July of 2026. And what was negotiated during the process of creating the contracts was that an additional 2% increase would come 6 months later on January 10th of 2027. So for a total increase for fiscal year of 27 of 5.9%, but it's split. So we're only paying half the, so we're paying 3.9% for half the year and then the total 5.9% for the rest of the year. Does that make sense?
So they're splitting up, they're not getting the full 5.9% on day one. They're doing part of it at the beginning and part of it halfway through.
Exactly.
Which is new because the previous year it was just annual.
Yes, and it has been done in the past, but it wasn't done in the last round.
Okay.
So the third column, the one on your far right, is the FY28 adjustment. So that's the 4.9% that applies for fiscal year 28, and that one applies for the full fiscal year.
No, I just want to clarify.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Okay, so
Thank you.
that's what's happening in section 4. These are the executive branch statutory salaries, increases the elected state officer salaries. The next section, which you'll find starting on page, actually it's the same section within the same section, but the next set of salaries that are adjusted are the department and agency head salaries. So exact same thing is happening here.
Page 9.
Yeah, we're crossing out all of the old ones and starting on page 9, here are the new ones for executive branch statutory salaries. The same thing, what's authorized on July 12th of 26 is that 3.9, an additional 2% in January, and then the full 4.9 for the following fiscal year is the third column. So I'm gonna not go through every one of these.
Yep.
Just skip ahead to the.
I'm just curious, I mean, there's some real distinction, among these different, secretary or department level commissioners, and I'm just, wondering, is that something a lot of them are the exact same amounts, right, across, but how is that decided? How are the amounts for, say, the Secretary of Administration, Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife, each of those, there are different rates, and is it the same rate every secretary?
I do not believe they're all at the same rate. I do think that this was when the statutory salaries were originally set. I'm actually not sure what year that was. I can certainly look into it.
No, it was, I'm just curious, and you have enough to do, so.
No, well, I mean, it's an interesting question and I'm happy to look into it. It might be that DHR is a good resource for this question. Better than me, but I'm also happy to look into it.
57 to 133, that's really the range, and it's, anyway.
$20,000, $25,000
Yeah.
difference between them.
Yeah.
I think Amy's gonna be able to answer
Amy,
this.
do you want to come to the table so you know?
Thank you, Amy.
So Amy Pope, Joint Fiscal Office. So so I worked for the Department of Human Resources, so that's why I have some inside knowledge. But for the way we would look at these departments was small versus large departments. And so that's a direct relationship to the salary. So it had to do with maybe the size of the number of employees, the budget that it controlled, those types of things.
So pages of salaries.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on to page 13. Now we're in section 5. And actually the next next 3 sections, 5, 6, and 7 cover the judicial branch. So these increase the salaries of judicial branch officers in section 5, assistant judges in section 6, and then probate judges in section 7. So you'll see they're set forth a little bit differently. The chief justices and associate justices are set forth in section 5. assistant judges, we don't have the same, we don't have the same columns there because the numbers apply to all of the assistant judges. And then in section 7, the probate judges. And you will see that there is some difference across the counties for the probate judges. And my understanding is that that reflects the different workloads in those counties, so that some of those probate judges are part-time and some are full-time. Okay, so I'll move on to section 8 now. So we're into the statutory salaries for the sheriffs. So increases statutory salaries of the county sheriffs in statute by the same figures, 3.9% in July of 26, an additional 2% in January of 27, and then the 4.9% for FY 28. So the whole bill essentially tracks section 1. Same thing for section 9 with the state's attorneys, increases the statutory salaries for the state's attorneys in statute in the same manner. And you'll also notice in this section, no, these are pretty consistent. So the last section is section 10, and this is the one that outlines the appropriations for the increases for all 3 branches of government. So section A provides the executive branch appropriates $23,918,120 from the general fund in FY 27. And the transportation fund, $50 million in FY 27. And then other funds is $27,184,607 for fiscal year 27 to fund these increases for the executive branch. And it also has language authorizing transfers as necessary to administer the Pay Act.
So that last 27 million, I know we have people who are tied to federal grants and things like that.
Yes.
So that federal funds make sense to me.
That's right.
Special fund and other sources. Do you want to talk about that, Amy?
So I believe that the administration sort of takes the total amount of money needed for the executive branch specifically, because this is for the judiciary and the executive branch, and sort of just applies a percentage off the whole entire like personal services and salaries. So it's all of the special funds that are assigned to salaries.
Okay.
And is the General Assembly in here too?
It is,
That's,
but
we're coming.
it's coming, yeah. So first we got to get through both fiscal years of each of the other branches. So, so for, now I'm on page 23. So if you look at halfway down the page, we're in fiscal year 28 for the executive branch. So the appropriation there is $24,974,632 for FY 28. Transportation fund is another 3 million. And then the other funds is $28,362,343 for FY 28. So those are the executive branch appropriations to administer the Pay Act. So now I'm on subsection B on page 24. So this is the appropriations for the judicial branch. So the general fund appropriation for the judicial branch employees is $3,800,867 in FY 27. From other sources, we've got a $277 and $316 appropriation in FY 27. And then FY 28, the general fund appropriation is $2,466,396. And then the appropriation from other sources is $179,954 for FY 28. So that is for judicial branch employees, also authorizes the Chief Justice to extend the provisions of the collective bargaining agreement to judicial branch employees who are not covered by the agreement. And then lastly is subsection C, which sets out the appropriations for the legislative branch. So for the legislative branch, the appropriation from the general fund is $914,634 for FY 27. And then for FY 28, the appropriation from the general fund is $778,939.
It's so much lower compared to the other 2 branches. I know we have fewer people and we're only part-time, et cetera, but that's striking.
That's it. The effective date is July 1.
Okay. Any questions for Bryn on this? Dave, go ahead.
It's probably here, I just haven't found it yet. is the legislative pay increase tied to what the constitutional officers get? In terms of if they get 3.9, the legislature gets 3.9,
Yes,
that's in here, the language.
yes, it is.
Thank you.
Yes, I think it's actually in section 2, but I can point you to it.
But that's my understanding.
Yes.
Yes, that was something that we put into place about
4 years
9
ago,
years ago.
6 years ago.
It was
Longer than that.
pre-COVID.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was like.
remember it created quite a
I
firestorm.
remember, yes, we were voting ourselves through the noise and we're always very hard to do the job. Long as I've been here. David,
9 and 4.9.
we're always indexed as long as I've been here. Yeah, whatever the constitutional officers are, we'll be the same.
4 years.
Yeah.
It used to be, we had to vote an increase
Every time.
before it
Right.
got tied into the.
Right. And that was a big deal to switch it to just have an automatic, so we would have to fight about it.
Right.
And I know from a legislative standpoint, we've had NCSL try to look at how we compare with other state legislators and legislatures. It's really difficult to compare because you've been to any conferences, every state is so different in how they do things, the committees work, how many times they meet, even if they're biennium, they maybe meet a whole lot one year and not the other year, and
And then
there
there's
just
New
isn't a way to compare. And then there's New Hampshire, but then they do a lot of committee meetings
Right,
for $100 a year.
right.
Yeah, for 435 of them.
No per diem.
Yeah. Could be worse, you could be in New Hampshire. Anyway, it's always very interesting to see when we've tried to like line us up to say, oh, how do we compare? It just isn't. It's so, it's worse. It's like apples and aardvarks. I mean, it's just not even oranges.
And we need office allowances and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I love it when I get those emails about, here's a welcome mat for your office door. Oh, yeah.
I mean, with the offices, yeah.
And your staff can have, yeah, right. Anyway, thank you, Brianna. Amy, do you want to talk to us about the fiscal note, please?
I sure can. I left my computer over there. I don't know if you want me to share or just, I have
We
copies.
have copies.
Okay, you've got copies. Perfect. So I think the best thing I think would be to just go to page 2 where it beautifully has all the things you really need to know. And there's 3 tables rather. And then the first table, table 1, just breaks out the percentage and the annual rate of adjustment. And then table 2 and 3 identify the appropriations. And I think the thing that you would want to know is that on table 2, under the general fund, you've been carrying this number in your construct. You didn't appropriate it, but with the understanding that you would be, and it's been moving around as the numbers have been coming in and changing and being analyzed. And so this money is accounted for in your construct right now, just not appropriated.
Right, but we found out the number Friday afternoon. Right, exactly. So total for general fund for next year is 28.6 million for FY 27, and for FY 28 is 28.2 million.
That's correct.
Any questions for Amy on this information? Chair Byron, is there anything you want to say about this? It came from your committee.
Yeah, no, I mean, we.
You want to introduce
sorry.
yourself? No, just come over for a second.
Yes, of course. Let's so informally, semi-formal. Good afternoon, almost committee, Madam Chair. For the record, Representative Matt Byron, Chair, House Government Operations and Military Affairs. Yes, we made brisk work of this last week. The package itself was a little delayed getting to us due to an ongoing bargaining unit that is still in some discussions. So we just utilized information from JFO, Department of Human Resources and Council to use these numbers to insert into the existing fields for the percentage structures that were discussed. We had some of the same questions as a committee in and around function and just sort of how the mechanisms work within the 3 different branches, just to give ourselves a better understanding of the mechanics of the bill. But I just see this as an incredibly vital piece of legislation, a money bill that puts the paychecks in hands of the people who operate our mechanisms of government.
And I'm just trying to find your committee, if I can get to the right committee. What was the vote out of your committee?
It was unanimous. I want to say it was 901.
How many people are on your committee?
And now,
Okay, I'm looking it up just on your committee page, so we know, 901. Looks like you have 10. Okay. Any other questions for Chair Byron about that? Okay.
greatly appreciate the time and consideration of including this in your.
I think the plan is to include it in the budget. Unless I hear others, but I'm looking at Emily, I'm thinking that's what the plan, the directive we've been given is to put this in the budget. Sometimes it goes separately, doesn't it?
Be an amendment.
Right.
Yes.
It'll be an amendment, but does it sometimes go separately? Does anybody?
Sometimes it's its own standalone.
Yeah, so I will just absolutely confirm, unless you already have with the speaker, that we want this to go in the budget. I will check with the speaker to confirm, but either way, we still have to vote the bill. So is there a motion to support H950? John, a second, Wayne? Any other discussion? Yes.
I just can't help but make the comments that in light of the conversations we've been having with a difficult budget
Yes.
and with the small increases we have tried to eke out for a lot of organizations that are doing the work of the state. I guess this just reminds me how important our scrutiny is on adding positions
Yes.
because of the impact they clearly have.
Yes.
This is a negotiated contract, we don't.
I know, and I'm just surprised that it came in so high, given the environment that we're in right now. I'm struggling with that when I know what people are making that are in state government.
Looks to me like I should have not turned down that DEC commissioner job.
Right in 28, it's even more lucrative. All right, we've had a motion, and a second to approve H950. And if there's no further discussion, the clerk can call the roll, please.
Representative Wooley,
Yes.
Representative Dickinson,
Yes.
Representative Feltus,
Yes.
Representative Krasinski,
Yes.
Representative Rowe.
Yes.
He is absent. Representative Nigro,
Yes.
Representative Squirrel, yes. Representative Stevens.
Yes.
Representative Yakavoni
Yes.
and Representative Shaw,
Yes.
10-0.
1001. And it sounds like HR is the negotiating party. So Tom, I think this falls in your lap.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Dave.
So legislative pay for those who come next time will go up 5.9%?
That's my understanding.
January?
I read this, yeah.
Yeah, okay,
That's my joke about we go from 11 cents to 11.5 cents an hour.
okay. I was trying to follow that, I wondered, yeah.
Are we doing the usual appropriations, then the stripping is from the budget?
Yes, so here we are.
All right, so I'm gonna hold this until we find out what's going in the budget.
Yes.
I don't need to send this.
Right, so hang on to that, and we voted on it, and I'll check with the speaker. We have been informed that the floor is on recess until 1 o'clock, so this would be a good time to eat your lunch, and then we'll go back to the floor at 1 o'clock. And I don't know of any other bills at this point.
Trevor, you'll do a flag and send that to me.
Well, if we.
Well, I don't
put it
have
into-
anything to send.
No, something like that.
Well, if we put it into the budget, then we don't need
I don't
to
need to do
do
that.
it separately on the floor. So you may or may not be presenting this.
Yeah, I mean, it's only just saying 10-01.
So it's already in the budget, the money is accounted for. in
We
the budget.
reviewed this bill and it's a 10-0.
It's not gonna be the hardest floor report you've ever done.
So
All
you
right.
said floor?
Floor is at 1 o'clock. Floor is at 1 o'clock, offices today.